Yeah, boy.
What's up, guys? A few people have been asking me what my favorite skill trees are in Outward, and others have asked for a list of the best options in general. So I figured let's just rank them all from worst to best and see if it helps anyone. Now, to be fair, there are no bad skill trees in Outward. There's just some that seem a little bit better than others. There are, of course, 11 skill trees in Outward, as the 2 from New Sirocco don't count. They aren't the same thing, and can be grabbed on any character, technically. Plus, I rarely use them anyway, because building New Sirocco sucks. But regardless, here are Outward's skill trees ranked from worst to best. For number 11, we have the Kazite Spellblade skill tree. Being one of the first skill trees you'll ever find in the game, it's pretty darn good. I mean, Elemental Discharge being my favorite, giving you access to a very ranged skill, dealing high elemental damage and impact. Unfortunately, this class does take a little bit too much mana to use after you use the breakthrough point. It just does really feel like a little bit too much mana, but that's very minimal. You can get a lot of mana regardless. Now, I've never been a big fan of Gong Strike. I think it's actually a very bad skill because it puts you in a bad position and takes a long time to actually activate. It takes way too long. Plus a 30-second cooldown versus a 10-second cooldown, which Elemental Discharge has, just does not feel right to me. Also, Gong Strike gets rid of your Elemental Imbue on your weapon. Never understood that. It immediately makes me pick Elemental Discharge every time. So, this is the worst skill tree in Outward. For me, I love it though. It's one of my favorites to use, but it is lacking damage. It doesn't give you any damage increases. Also, its breakthrough point is just kind of meh. Extra 15 to health, stamina, and mana. I mean, that doesn't really match the other breakthrough points and the other skill trees. So it is arguably the worst skill tree in the game, but still an option I love to take. For spot number 10, we have the second worst skill tree in Outward, and that is the Philosopher skill tree. Now, again, I hate to do this because, like Kazite Spellblade, this is another one of my favorites. I love mana regen. I just do. The breakthrough gives it to you. It's very nice to have. It's a high amount, and it's very convenient to have. It really is. Also, you have Mana Ward and Fire Sigil in this skill tree, 2 skills that can be argued to break the game at times, making you immune to damage or simply just offering too much fire damage, to be fair. Also, you have Chakrams. I love Chakrams myself, although Chakrams do require a lot of skill to use, and I feel like a lot of new players pick this skill tree because they see the, oh, mana regen, that's awesome, but then they don't really get a lot out of this skill tree because they don't know how to efficiently use these skills. So I do feel like it lacks because of that. Also, Ice Sigil is amazing, but I feel like Ice Sigil and not being able to get Fire Affinity, I don't know. I always feel like I should get both for some reason. Fire Affinity is extremely, extremely good. It's worth taking this skill tree alone. But Ice Sigil never really felt as good as the other sigils to me. I wish it was a little bit better. The cooldown on some of the skills to activate in Ice Sigil is a bit high. But still, again, really good skill tree, just not quite as good as some of the other options. Next up, at number 9, we have the third worst skill tree in Outward, and I hate saying it like that because, again, it's not bad, but Rogue Engineer is borderline OP. For 2 things, unfortunately, though. Only if you're using daggers, and only if you are using a backpack that doesn't impede your dodge. Now, you can actually take this skill tree no matter what, because the breakthrough point will let you dodge a lot more often. It reduces the stamina cost by half of all your dodges. It's really, really good. Extremely good if you're using Knuckles or the, the punching weapons, the gauntlets. They're extremely good for those because those require a lot of stamina. They require you to dodge, since Knuckles are the only weapon that don't block all physical or all damage in general. They block 90%, not 100. So really, really good. Again, though, this is another one of those skill trees where the top tier skill just kind of, it puts me off. Almost every single time I take this skill tree, I get to the top and I go, it doesn't really matter. I don't use pressure plates unless I'm using a pressure plate build. So I'm not really going to get the damage bonus from that, even though that is a really good damage bonus. The stealth, I don't use stealth. This isn't really a stealth game. I mean, you can, but it's not really built around that. So I've always felt like the top 2 passive skills in the skill tree really hurt it. I mean, they really do. If you're using daggers, you have to take this because all the dagger skills are OP. They're insanely good. But those top two, I mean, they really hurt this skill tree. They just really do. If the breakthrough point wasn't so good, it would be the worst skill tree. But the breakthrough point is insanely useful on any build. Now up at number 8, we have the Wild Hunter skill tree. This skill tree is really, really good for 2 different types of builds. Number 1, a bow build. I mean, you want to take that skill instead of Predator Leap to get extreme bleeding on enemies. That's really, really nice. Used to break the game originally, but now with DE, it doesn't quite break the game anymore. It's just really nice to have. Obviously, the tier 1 skills are all based on dealing high impact and dealing good damage with a bow. So really, if you're taking a bow, you've got to be using this. And Enrage is an OP skill. You've got to have it in every build. You just do. Now, the top 3 skills, which are really what we care about, I don't care too much about the breakthrough. It's just extra health. It is very nice to have. Obviously, if you're going to go tank, if you're going to be taking damage, if you're going to be using more health, some skills actually require more health in order to do more damage. But the top 3 skills are really what we care about. And Predator Leaps is awesome. Predator Leaps is crazy, crazy good. It does high impact. It does really good damage. I highly recommend it because of that impact. But the problem is it eats through your weapon insanely quick. It's the same problem that Kazite Spellblade has. This Elemental Discharge is just going to shred your weapon so quickly. So honestly, if you're using a Czar weapon, Wild Hunter is pretty darn good. I mean, those weapons already have high impact. This is going to make that even more ridiculous. Now, the top tier skill on this skill tree is Feral Strike, and honestly, it's subpar at best. The problem with it is that it has such a high cooldown, but it can only be used once because it takes away your Enrage bonus. I don't understand that, really. If it's going to have a fast cooldown, why on earth does it get rid of your Enrage, you know? Now, you can get around this by simply chugging Enrage potions. It does make this skill extremely good because the skill does high damage. But unless you're doing that, it's really not reliable. You're only going to be able to use it once per fight. So honestly, this is a great skill tree. The one thing that hurts it for me is that health is not as important as some of these other breakthroughs that you get from the other skill trees. Sitting at number 7, this is where we start to get into the territory of every skill tree from here on out is so gosh darn good. It really is. It's really hard to rank these. But Mercenary in and of itself is super special. It's got a lot of stuff for you. First off, you have Iron Shot and Cold Shot, both extremely good. Use them with a gun. Iron Shot instantly knocks down almost everything in the game, up until the Caldera, really. Icy Shot deals high damage, insta-killing loads of enemies, and it's great against bugs, too. Bugs are really weak to ice, so it shreds stuff. Get it in a good gun, and you're just going to destroy the game. You've got Blood Bullet and Infused Shield at the very top, both S-tier skills. They're crazy, crazy good. Infused Shield allows you to block elemental damages, just staying in the fray, never leaving battle, which is what you want with the shield because you don't want to be dodging. You want to be blocking all your attacks. Blood Bullet gives you health back. Unfortunately, it does have a little bit too high of a cooldown, but you can fix that with cooldown on your armor and making it really, really good. The breakthrough point is also insane. It gives you 10% more movement speed. I always thought that Marathoner should have been the breakthrough. Marathoner feels better to me. It's kind of confusing that they did it that way because the breakthrough is usually the better one, but it doesn't matter because you get both with this skill tree. So Swiftfoot's going to give you 10% increased movement speed, which is going to make you faster. And then Marathoner is going to give you 40% less stamina consumption while running. This is the best skill tree in the game for tank classes. Not in terms of actually granting you more tankiness, but in terms of getting around the map. Because the biggest problem with tank builds is that they're freaking slow. If you choose to use Czar armor, you will literally be playing the game for months. Alright, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's going to take forever to beat the game because that armor is extremely slow. It really is. So this alleviates a lot of that pain of wearing heavy armor. And the other thing is that you might be thinking, oh, I'll just switch armors, right? But you can't because heavy armor like Czar armor, Zagus armor, Kitsunugi armor, all that stuff, it weighs 20 pounds per piece. So you really can't be putting it in your backpack. You're going to be wasting a lot of space. So this really is the skill tree for your tank builds. It's really good regardless. A lot of people like to use it on their light mage builds as well because you're going to be running a lot. And if you're only running and never dodging, so you're always like kiting away from the enemy, for example, hexes and gun builds, both really good to use with mercenary because you're going to be running a lot. And you basically have infinite stamina if you take this skill tree. So a great skill tree, phenomenal. I think it is very, very good, but I put it in the middle because I still think there are some better than this. Now at number 6, we have my least favorite skill tree in the game. This would be the Speedster skill tree. Now you might be wondering, why is it at number 6 if it's your least favorite? Because I understand its power. That is why. I hate this skill tree with a passion. I've taken it several times. I've used it to great effect. I don't get enough out of it. It's all based on cooldown. You get a lot of cooldown based on alertness levels. You get a lot of getting your skills back instantly from the skills. But to be honest, you don't get anything out of this skill tree. There are no attack skills other than probe that you get here. And you can grab probe without actually taking the skill tree. All this stuff is passive skills, essentially. I mean, there are 2 active skills, but they don't actually attack. They're defensive, sort of. And so this skill tree, to me, doesn't always feel great. It is ridiculously strong because cooldown is broken in this game if you get it to high enough levels. It just is. With correct skills, you can spam high impact, high damage attacks and destroy the game. But unfortunately, activating probe to get your alertness levels actually weakens your character. It will decrease your elemental resistance. Not by much, but by enough. And I hate that. I like having really high elemental resistance all the time. Now, you can take the passive at the top to get more protection, but if your protection's higher and your elemental resistance is lower, you're still going to take a lot of damage if you get hit with elemental attacks. So this is an acquired taste to skill tree. It really is. You're either going to like it or you're not. I don't think there's much middle ground. I only think it's good for high utility if you know exactly what you're doing and you know that you want to be using this. Otherwise, I usually avoid it. Now on to number 5, we have Warrior Monk, and this is my probably second favorite skill tree in the game. Now again, I put this one higher on the list because I do think that's not quite strong enough to be the best. But this is my second favorite skill tree in the game. It is awesome. I take this on almost every build. Not only does it give you Brace, which is the best skill in the game for its tier 1 skill, it offers you Stamina, which is arguably one of the most important stats in the game, because if you don't have Stamina, you can't dodge, you can't block, you can't attack. You need Stamina. You can have no health and still deal damage and block if you have Stamina. So Stamina is extremely important to me. Now, you also have Perfect Strike and Flash Onslaught, which are OP skills. Flash Onslaught inflicts confusion while dealing high damage and making you immune. A lot of people forget about that, but you literally become a ghost for a couple seconds or teleport to another dimension, whatever you want to call it. It's really cool. Now, Perfect Strike turns all your damage to raw damage and then cuts through the enemy really quickly. It's insane, inflicting pain as well, making you deal more damage for physical attacks. It's an awesome skill. Now, you also have Master Emotion, which is going to give you 10 elemental resistance while your discipline buff is active. This is an extremely valuable skill. I take this a lot because for certain builds, you're going to have your discipline boon active 24/7. If that's the case, it's often really good to take this just so you have a little bit more defense, even if you don't need it. Now, Counter-Strike is Counter-Strike. You're going to parry an attack and re-attack. There's not really much special about it. It's really good, really strong. Too bad Flash Onslaught takes away your discipline boon, but you do have another option, and I really like that. This skill tree, to me, is something I almost always take. That Stamina as the breakthrough is so gosh darn good. Extra 40 Stamina, man, and that's just nice to have on every build. If you want to use all of that to turn into mana, then you're not even using your regular health and stamina for mana. You're going to be using that extra, so you're still going to have a good amount of stamina. It just feels really all around like a high quality skill tree, and I love it. Now at number 4, we have the Rune Sage skill tree. Of course, everybody knows about this one because it's what everybody loves to take their first time around. You get runes, you place down Runic Trap, you beat half the game with 0 effort. That's just how it works. The Runic Trap is extremely good for basic enemies. Now, it does fall off a lot late game because you can't actually increase its damage with buffs. So, for example, armor buffs, they don't actually increase the trap's damage. This is literally just an OP skill for the early game, and that's about it. Still usable in the late game, but it's not going to insta-kill everything. The breakthrough point grants you more mana. This doesn't seem like much, but it is actually pretty good. When you have a skill tree that offers you mana regen, though, this doesn't quite feel S tier. It's just good, and it's nice to have when you're going to be consuming a lot of mana with these runes. Now, all of the top tier skills are going to be extra buffs. You got Internalized Lexicon, which is good for builds like shield builds, dagger builds that you still want to use runes on, and then the other two just buff and make your runes deal more damage. So you've got a lot of options with this. You can use a one-handed sword, you can use a two-handed sword, both dealing high damage, low impact though. Then you have the runic protection, which is insane. If you actually take the runic prefix, this gives you a ton of buffs. It makes you very, very tanky compared to what you would be otherwise. You can activate the runes backwards to activate runic heal and heal yourself. I mean, that's never bad. Having free healing is great if you're not big on potions, which, I mean, eventually you will be because they're so easy to make. But if you're not big on potions as a start, I mean, you got free heal. That's awesome. You also have lightning damage from afar, which is a really cool skill that you can use in this game. The runic skill tree is amazing. Not only can it be activated by itself to deal high damage, but you can use it as backup with just runic protection and make it usable, because runic protection is that good. Now, there are two downsides to this skill tree that make it not quite the best or the top 3. Number 1, you have to have a lexicon in your hand to get the most benefits out of this. Like I already said, you could take internalized lexicon so that you don't have this, but you lose out on a lot of the extra buffs that the runic prefix skill actually gives you. So that's a little bit unfortunate. You also have the fact that using runes takes up half your skill slots. To use runes to the maximum potential, you need 4 open rune slots. And guess what? You only got 8, so that's half. That is a lot of slots for just 4 runes. So it's really hard to use runes and a full other half of your build at the same time. Like if you were going Warrior Monk, for example, Warrior Monk has 2 skills, 2 high damage skills, plus Brace. That's 3 skill slots, plus all your runes. You only got 1 extra skill slot. And there are a load of skills you might want to put in there, or maybe even hotbar an item. So runes really do take up a lot of your hotbar. It kind of sucks sometimes. But that is the trade-off you get for such a powerful skill tree. Next up, we have the Hex Mage skill tree, sitting at number 3. And I know what some of you are saying already in your head. Oh my word, he's wrong. This is the best skill tree in the game. Oh my word, what is Sheen doing? Well, after a lot of consideration, no, this is not the best skill tree in the game. I have very good reasons for this, but it is freaking amazing. First off, hexes are extremely fun and cool. Not only do you get a long-range magic that deals insane damage, but it just absolutely destroys stuff with low mana cost. None of these skills actually cost really that high mana. It's a really, really good skill tree. Not only does it deal damage, but it debuffs your enemy at the same time. So, Jinx, Torment, then Rupture just destroys the game. You can also get the passive at the top there to deal more elemental damage when you're tired. I don't use it much, but if you're efficient, you can get a lot more damage out of this. The breakthrough point here, which is Bloodlust, is arguably one of the few breakthroughs in the game that completely breaks the game. Funny wording there, but it really does. It gets rid of all of your health burn, your mana burn, your stamina burn, because every time you kill something, you get some of it back. You'll actually get health back a little bit too. So it is actually, it's insane. It completely changes the game. If you've not taken Hexmage for a while, and then you go and you take this, it'll be a completely different experience. Because that stamina burn is a huge deal. I mean, when you use stamina, you burn a lot of it. And you don't realize it until you take Hexmage and you go, hey, I've got full stamina 24/7, no matter what I do. This is awesome. And it really is. It's a breakthrough that they put in the game, and it feels so much better than almost every other breakthrough. It's crazy. Now, the last thing that we have, of course, is the Blood Sigil and Cleanse. Cleanse is just great. There's not much to talk about. It's just getting a Darkstone, so there's not much there. But Blood Sigil is another broken skill in the game. This thing deals stupid damage. I believe someone said to me at one point that if you use the Dagger Slash skill inside this, it actually does the highest damage per second in the game. I've never used that much, but according to some pretty reliable sources, that's what that does. You can also activate Conjure inside this sigil to give you a literal buddy. It's a ball of floating blood that shoots for you. There's not really any way you can go wrong with that. It's insanely powerful, deals impact as well and damage on the side. It's just super good, and it lasts for a long time too. So Blood Sigil is really gosh darn good, and it can buff your decay damage quite a bit, and I mean, it's awesome. It's real. The unfortunate thing about this skill tree, you know what it is? The unfortunate thing is that Blood Sigil and Rupture cannot be grabbed at the same time. Both are extremely fun, but you have to kind of go into one or the other. And it's so sad to see that sometimes, because you'd be like, oh man, both these would be so fun. It fits really well into my build. But you can't use both, you know? You can't have everything. This is a game. That'd be too OP. So the Hex Mage skill tree is amazing, worth it for that breakthrough, and all of the stuff above the breakthrough are S tier as well. So, the second most powerful skill tree in the game, a lot of people aren't going to like this, it's Primal Ritualist. And I know, a lot of people aren't going to like it, like I said, but it's true. This skill tree is insanely good. People don't like to use it because you have to place down the totems, and I'll agree, it's a little annoying. They weigh 12 pounds if you have both of them in your backpack. It's a lot, but the sheer tankiness of this skill tree, and the fact that I think you could beat the entire game with just the Ghost Drum and nothing else. I don't think you need a single other item but the Ghost Drum to beat the entire game. That's how strong it is. It inflicts Aether Bomb after a few hits, and Aether Bomb takes out half of an enemy's health. And this enemy I'm talking about is a Gargoyle, dude. A Gargoyle is so freaking tanky, and the Ghost Drum will destroy it very quickly. And all you gotta do is kite around. Just kite around for a little bit. The Primal Ritualist skill tree is the best for co-op builds. It offers both defense to you and your partner. So if you're going for a really strong co-op build, this is what you want to take. It's insanely good. Also in co-op builds, whoever the enemy's on, the other guy can hit the totems. And because totems deal so much damage, they'll de-aggro and they'll switch aggro constantly. It's a very, very strong way to play. And even if you're going solo, you can just stand in the middle of the totems, wait for the enemy to walk up to you, and then fight them regularly. As you're fighting them, if you're in the middle of the totems, you'll just automatically hit them, deal more damage. It's so strong. It really is. If you use this with a proper tank build, you'll take very minimal damage every single time you get hit. Now, the only unfortunate thing about this skill tree is that the two skills right above the breakthrough are kind of, Nurturing Echo is extremely good because you get health and stamina back, but it depends on how many times you hit the totems, and it has a very high cooldown. So it's like, sometimes it's very, very good, and at other times you can't use it. So it really depends on the situation. Unfortunately, Reverberation's pretty bad. This is a skill that seems really, really cool, but doesn't work out in almost any situation because totems are more valuable when they're being hit. They're on the ground, you're hitting them, they're building up damage. The unfortunate thing about Reverberation is it requires a few seconds to first off pull the thing off. You're going to have to stand there for a bit and do this. But then Reverberation picks up one of your totems. So you're immediately losing damage from that totem, and you'd have to put it back down if you're in a long fight. Now, the good news is Reverberation does activate a lot of damage when it is doing that, the waves that it does, and it does impact as well, I believe. But it never feels like it's worth it, and almost always feels like just leaving the totem on the ground is going to give you the better damage. So I unfortunately don't like it. But of course, we have the two passives at the top that let you use both totems right next to each other and grant you extra 5 barrier and protection when you're inside the radius of those totems. It's extremely good, great skill tree, built around tanks and co-op, and I love to see a skill tree built around co-op. So this is the second best skill tree in Outward, even if you might not like it, unfortunately. So, what is the best skill tree in Outward? I bet at least half of you already knew this. It's Cabal Hermit. This skill tree is very simple. There's not a lot to it, but it's the most powerful. First off, you have Mana Push, which is really good for high impact, great in the Wind Sigil. You've got Call to Elements, which grants you a random buff depending on what cave you're in. Oftentimes, it'll give you the buff that you need for that cave, which is really strong. Extra Weather Tolerance, great to have, not really necessary. Reveal Soul for infinite mana. I mean, why not? The Breakthrough Point is the OP stat here. I mean, this is going to give you extra damage to elements by 10. So instead of whenever you activate your boons, you get a 20% buff to damage and defense. When you have the Shamanic Resonance Breakthrough Point, you are going to get 30 instead of 20. It's an extra 10, but that's a lot. So not only do you have extra defense, but you have more damage. And this stacks very, very well. Yeah, it just seems to stack better than most things. And the Wind Sigil is one of my favorites. I love Wind Sigil. When using it, you can use Spark, which only uses 5 mana in the Wind Sigil, and it kills stuff extremely fast. You can also use Conjure in the Wind Sigil to insta-kill most enemies, at least most lower tier enemies, as it does over 100 lightning damage in one hit. Then, of course, you have Wind Infuse, which is the other one you could take instead, and that one gives you more impact. I mean, you can knock stuff over in 1-2 hits sometimes. That's OP. That's insanely strong. So the only problem with Wind Infuse is that you are losing elemental damage from a boon. But if you're using a high elemental damage weapon, it doesn't matter. So Wind Infuse is really, really strong. Hard not to use on slower weapons because it increases their speed. Conjure, of course, is the last one. Conjure can be used in a variety of ways. You can summon a ghost, you can use it in Blood Sigil, and you can use it in Wind Sigil. It just has a lot of options. And Wind Sigil activates a lightning strike. You don't need to be near the sigil. It's a very powerful strike. And Blood Sigil, it activates the blood turret, which I already talked about, is really good. So all around, there's not really any weaknesses to this skill tree other than the fact that you got to have the wind totems, wind pillars active in each region to use them. And unfortunately, Wind Infuse loses you out on some elemental damage. But again, there's ways around that, and it's just so strong that often it feels worth it. Cabal Hermit is the single best skill tree in Outward. It is usable on any character, any build. The only thing you're not really going to want to use it on is a pure physical damage build because you are getting a lot of the damage bonus from elements, but it could still be usable on that for extra defense. So it's always usable, and it just feels really, really good. So if you don't know exactly what you want to put in your build, you got 2 skill trees you want to use, but you don't know what to use for the last, you are always safe picking Cabal Hermit. It will always work for you. And there you go, guys. There are all of these skill trees ranked in the game. I think that's a pretty reasonable list. It's hard to actually say which ones are the best and which ones are the worst, because there's definitely some variation you could put with some of these. Like Mercenary, Speedster, and Wild Hunter, you can move those around a bit. But I do think that the top 5 are probably my favorite 5 skill trees in the game. Hexmage, Primal, Cabal, top 3. Those feel amazing on any build. Hexmage is hard not to take just because of Bloodlust. Hopefully this helped you guys out. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time.